Okay, we are back. Short form marketing is the topic here. Though I did a lot of work on this old doc, the automatic behaviors doc, which will be eventually inserted into part two, right here, right between biological conditions and emotion regulation. Emotion regulation we could talk about as a sort of automatic behavior that occurs that we can try to get in the way of. And yeah, so I want to read that at some point, but perhaps when we start up here, maybe we can go about this discussion. So let me get the chat going here. I have a really small Twitch channel. I have been streaming for a while. More recently, though, I started editing past moments from the stream, and I've been creating videos from that, and I've been posting those videos onto YouTube. The videos that are short enough, I've actually edited into shorts. However, I have not released any of the shorts. I want to talk about how to go about my introduction to short form. How should I market these? And then what more can I do to push my shorts, which I think are going to be the main mechanisms for actually growing at least viewership of the channel, but perhaps growing the channel itself. All right, a little rough around the edges there, but I think it was decent enough to just ship. So let's ship it. Yeah, I don't know about this. The second question here, like, what can we do to push the channel more? I don't know if we even want to push the channel more than the short form. I could start reaching out to other content creators. That's really what needs to happen at this point. I need to start getting collabs going, because that in conjunction with the content that I'm putting out can really get this thing going. That said, I don't know if we're ready. Like, there's still so much to do. At some point, there's going to be nothing left to do except for reach out to people. But at this point, we might want to... Yo, Birdbanes, what's good? At this point, we might want to focus on making sure that the content is good for part two, at least. Given that part two is going to be like the... I think part two is going to be the part of the document that when I'm explaining anything, I will refer back to it more than either part one or part three. Like, as funny as this sounds, like the whole entire document's catered towards really what's going on in part three, determining the path for life. But I think when I'm actually talking about things, I'm probably going to be referring back to part two and part one mainly, and not part three. But we'll see. Half screen again. Kind of. Today I'm going to be reading this, so I guess it's going to make sense to have that on the other side. But yeah, what is the best thing to do about this? Should I make myself smaller? Like, what is the way to go about this? What do other content creators do? Like, what do other streamers do when there's... Should I just is it possible for me to make a source for... No, it's got to be a window. It can't be browser. It's got to be something like application capture, window capture. Window capture, add existing. No, create new. This is going to be... How do I do, like, left Chrome? How would this work? This is going to be tough, actually. Man. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to get this back every single time. Yeah, capture method, automatic. And then, yeah, match, window match priority is going to be tough. Window title must match, or Match title, otherwise find window of same type. So this could end up being the other type, but then I can put it up here. This would be like a different scene. I could do something like this. This is so silly. But I don't know. I'm gonna gank it for now. I'm gonna get rid of it. Generally, the primary screen being used is larger, and the cam at the corner of the screen, where where it's rarely used. Should I just throw them around my? So yeah, I guess for the majority of this channel, I've always spent more time here, and I've always done kind of this thing. I've always gone like 170 over here, and that's kind of been the way to do it. However, we're dealing with something where we can't do that right now. I guess I could always just do this. I could always just blow this up when we're not working on it and then switch it back. That's actually the easiest way to go about this. I think for a while, though, actually, you know what, now that I'm thinking back, one of the reasons why I liked this was because then people could see what I was working on. Because usually this is catered towards what's going on the right here, but this time it's not. I think it just looks worse when someone goes to a stream or they see the thumbnail and they just see that I'm on Gemini. I think people are just anti-AI, so if they see that I'm just streaming it, just chatting and using Gemini, it looks bad. But that's what we're dealing with, so not the worst thing. Okay, so we're looking for how to market ourselves when we do shorts, short form content. Oh, I guess I should have mentioned that I want to do this for TikTok and shorts and YouTube shorts. All right, you're sitting on a content backlog, and you're correct that shorts are currently the most efficient vehicle for top of funnel growth. However, you need to adjust your expectations immediately. Shorts are excellent for growing a YouTube channel, but they are notoriously inefficient at converting viewers to Twitch live streams. To get value from this, you need to treat your shorts not as advertisements for your stream, but as a standalone product that happens to feature you. Cool. Okay, that's fine. As long as we get them to the YouTube channel, that would be fine. The launch, the software, do not do a grand opening. Right, we don't really care. The algorithm does not care about your debut. It cares about consistency and data points. Since you have a backlog of edited videos, you have the advantage of a buffer. So we only have 2 videos actually for shorts, but we can make more, obviously. The 30-day sprint, you have a backlog. Use it to schedule 1 short per day for the next 30 days. Jeez. Why? This feeds the algorithm enough data to categorize your viewers. It also tells YouTube you are an active channel. Do not dump 5 videos in 1 day. Recency bias is heavy. A video released today competes with everything released today. Spread them out. Schedule them for late afternoon or early evening. Data suggests this is when the doom scrolling audience is most active on weekdays. Hell yeah. The cold start reality. Your first 5 to 10 videos may get 0 to 10 views. That's great. This is normal. YouTube is testing your content on a small sample group. Do not delete them. Do not re-upload them. Let them sit. Shorts often pop off weeks later. Great. The push optimization. You asked how to push them. You cannot pay for this. You have to engineer it. The algorithm prioritizes retention, average percentage views viewed, and loopability. So the loop factor. If your short is 15 seconds, your goal is 100% plus retention. Edit the end of your video to flow seamlessly back into the start. If your sentence ends with "and that's why," and the video starts with "I hate this game," that's funny. The loop creates a continuous thought. Visual noise, retention editing. Twitch streams are passive, shorts are hyperactive. You cannot just crop a Twitch clip and post it. Captions are mandatory. Many people watch with sound off. Hard code. Okay, so we got that. We're doing captions. We're going to do that. We're going to have a little music in the background. And if I'm speaking about something, or if the thing is, I want to get my visuals on there. Like, I want to have myself on there, because then it shows that there's a place that people could go and find me. Must be retained and must be loopy. Hell yeah. We got to be loopy. That being said, I do think that there is something about just like mind-numbing video that might help us out. So at some point we're going to be adding in videos of like penguins and time lapses and stuff like that. I think I have a bunch of that stuff ready to go actually from a previous stream. Ensure your face cam and captions are not covered by the UI, right? I've kept that above, but we could always have the other stuff covered by the UI, which is fine. Keep critical visual info in the center. Metadata is SEO. Titles must be searchable. Funny stream moment is a dead titles. Use specific keywords like Elden Ring boss glitch, Warzone loadout meta. Hashtags, use 3 broad hashtags and 2 niche hashtags. Okay. Marketing and the leaky funnel. This is where you need to be realistic about growing the channel. The user behavior on shorts is swipe, dopamine swipe. Asking them to stop, click your profile, find a link, go to a different app, and watch a slow paced. Okay. I don't think that's the goal here. The solution, the related video bridge on YouTube Studio, you can link a short to a related video, link your short to a longer YouTube video. It is easier to keep them on YouTube than to move them to Twitch. Build the YouTube audience first. They are more likely to eventually find your Twitch. Great. Multi-platform is non-negotiable. You have the file. You must post it to TikTok and Instagram Reels as well. TikTok is actually better at converting to Twitch because the live culture is stronger there. And then Instagram is better for networking with existing friends, followers. Okay, the pinned comment tactic. Don't put links in the title. They aren't clickable. Put a link to your Twitch channel in the pin. So I don't know if we want to do that. I'll just put a link to my link tree. Copy, catch the chaos live daily. Nice. Okay. All right, that's pretty good. Well, if you look at the current stream capture, it doesn't exactly look YouTube short interesting unless you use another background and only use the audio. What I've done for the shorts is I've just cropped my face speaking pretty much. I've cropped like here, and that's like half of the screen. So it's like a very zoomed in image of me. Now, what did I do for the bottom though? Maybe the whole thing is me, which we could get away with now making that I think like I'll have me at the top, and then at the bottom I'll probably have some. So all YouTube shorts look the same. Well, this is where maybe at the bottom I put some different video, but I think they would look the same regardless, unless I just use different videos. I'm not sure how else other people do that. I think there's something nice about them looking the same too. When you're scrolling through a shorts thumbnails, and you want to like you felt good about watching one of my previous shorts, you would want to be able to identify which ones are mine easily, and me being in like a same spot at every time would be effective for that. All right, so what do I want to tell this thing? I don't think it's going to give me any more information here. I think it just gave me everything I needed. Right, my goal is not to have people come to Twitch. My goal is really to build the YouTube channel where I'm posting those videos. I do intend to post at least on TikTok as well, maybe Instagram, if I feel good about Facebook that day. And what else? Yo, Darmadam. I'm not going to feel good. I'm sorry. I'm not going to feel good about Facebook any day, so I'm not going to even include that. And what else? What else did it tell me? It told me, okay, the pinned comment, the multi-platform. I will probably link to my link tree so that people can find me wherever they want. I actually only have a backlog of two videos formatted for shorts, and I'm not sure if they are even short enough for TikTok. I think that was it. right? Push, launch. Will be hard to distinguish this short from that short and other shorts if all thumbnails look similar to one another. Sometimes the title gets truncated if it's too long, making identifying one. I don't think you're supposed to identify shorts from one to the other. Like I don't think it's not similar to YouTube videos in that way. I think you just want the shorts to have content, you know? Like people are usually swiping and then they see your short. It's not usually the case that people will find it via thumbnail, but if they do find it via thumbnail, it would be nice for them to be able to identify that it was me on the short. Do you remember that one dude said there are parallels to predictive processing in Buddhism? I think he was talking about dream yoga. Evan Thompson wrote a bit about it. Oh, the one guy, Dr. Laukkanen, right? Yeah, that's pretty interesting. He was talking about dream yoga. I'm curious what the connection would be, but you could easily make connections between predictive processing and that type of intuitive mindful experience, or not even a mindful experience, but just an experience in general. Yo, Onion, I'm glued up, all benevolent, and you want me to move my feet from the aisle. The rooster's still tired while I'm gluten. The one guy, Boris Krieger. Move my feet from the aisle. Is this like you're on a plane? I'm a big fan of the aisle seat because I'm too tall. That might be a fun prompt. We could prompt it up. What did this thing say? Anything new and interesting? 2 videos is not a backlog, it's a test. You cannot run a campaign yet because you don't have the inventory. Since your goal is specifically YouTube growth rather than Twitch conversion, you need to prioritize the YouTube ecosystem over the external Linktree approach. Here's the corrected approach based on your current constraints. YouTube Shorts is 3 minutes, so this is kind of... Whoa, TikTok has a 10-minute limit? Okay. So we might say screw Instagram Reels and we should just do YouTube and TikTok. Crazy that Google Gemini isn't up to date on YouTube short lengths. What's up with that? The 2 video strategies. Since you only have 2 videos, you are not ready for a marketing push. You are in the production pipeline, right? Do not post both videos today. Week 1, post 1 video on Tuesday, video 2 on Thursday. Okay, so this is kind of what I was thinking to do. You need to figure out how long it takes you to make one short. If it takes you 4 hours to edit a 45-second clip, what the heck? You'll burn out in a month. You need to establish a 2 to 3 videos per week cadence. Do not aim for daily uploads until you have a bank of 10 plus videos. Yeah, I'm curious if we can get shorts from previously uploaded videos. Like that might be really easy. The challenge is finding a 3-minute or less coherent, or cohesive, I should say, cohesive clip, because a lot of those videos like have a overarching theme to them. But I think it would be actually pretty easy. So maybe when do we want to do this push? Should we do this push in April? April is the short form push. AI told me once that when your brain feel fried from learning, it's a buildup of spent glutamate. That's correct, but it's recoverable, right? That was the difference between glutamate and adenosine. Adenosine you can't recover from unless you like take caffeine, which isn't really actually recovering you. It's just making the receptors do something that makes you feel like you're not as tired. But glutamate buildup you can recover from by resting, I think. I think that was the takeaway. So, what are the parallels between... All right, there it is. That's the one. Was there anything else that we can gain from here? I think the takeaway is pretty much I need to make more shorts, and then we find a time to release them at some cadence, some regular cadence, similar to how I'm releasing these YouTube videos. And I think that just having these, like just releasing these is fine. Just having them in the bank, just ready to go. Even though these guys are getting so small views, I think it's just good to like fill out the channel, give people stuff to go to. It's all stuff that I've deemed good enough. It's not the, you know, obviously I think that these like like these guys, the consciousness videos are just like really high quality in terms of how much time I spent on the transcript. These are not great unless you're, I mean, like the read through videos are not great unless you're just like doing audio only. So I wouldn't expect people to be really thrilled by these guys. This is more just for like recording history of our document, just you know, getting some progress reports in there. And we still need to do another progress report for the next section, which I think was also going to be an April thing. And then the other videos are just, you know, they're kind of just candy. Evan was saying that dreaming and perception are both similar to imagination, and that's the most appropriate framing. Yeah, I'd imagine so. I mean, all these things are just activating like the same parts of the brain, and I think there's just like a difference of like, I don't know, synchronization going on that affects whether or not you're conscious or dreaming or whatnot. I could be wrong about that, but it says a lot about our society. The way these videos are popular or not shows how much we need a real OG Gluta right now into ranks. We live in a society. Heidegger. Yeah, I haven't really marketed these videos, so I think they're good enough quality where if a bunch of people were to come here, if a bunch of people come here and they're actually interested in this channel, then I think they're going to be happy with the stuff that they find. Now, for people stumbling upon these videos, I don't know, some of this stuff is like in the weeds, and you know, we're not doing the most the clips are not the most practical clips yet. I think that those are going to come from part 2 discussions. All right, what am I doing here? We got to go. And then we could do our read through. The newer videos are pretty good. A little some for those not familiar with the Gluta game. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean they're not like incredible. You know, I'm still figuring out how to explain a lot of this stuff, but they're good enough where there's at least like some substance in there where maybe it'll get someone thinking in a different way or they'll learn something. So hopefully that's something that people find refreshing or at least challenging or at least interesting. All right, the parallels between Tibetan dream yoga and predictive processing are structural and epistemological. Both systems model the mind not as a passive receiver of reality, but as an active generator of it. Hey, there it is. AI talk. All right, in neuroscience, predictive processing argues that the brain generates a hallucination constrained by sensory input. In Vajrayana Buddhism, Tibetan dream yoga argues that the mind projects a reality constrained by karmic propensity. So let's see if constraint is used in the same way that we would use it in predictive processing. I mean, really, you could say constraint by priors or by bottom-up data, but I'm curious what karmic propensity means. All right, the generative nature of reality, the fundamental isomorphism between the two systems is the view that reality is a construct, not a given, which that's cool and all, but like we got to try to go deeper into that, to this analogy. Right, prediction machine, it's constantly generating a top-down model of the world to explain bottom-up sensory data. right. A controlled hallucination where the brain's internal model is constrained, corrected by sensory input, prediction error. And then dreaming state, an unconstrained hallucination with sensory input gated off during REM sleep. The brain's generative model runs free, driven entirely by internal expectations. Okay. Right, during a dreaming state, the sensory input is gated off during REM sleep. The brain's generative model runs free, driven entirely by internal expectations. Predictive processing. This is uncontrolled hallucination, right? The Tibetan dream yoga views all phenomena as Maya, as illusion, projections of the mind that lack inherent existence. Waking state, we perceive a solid world because our karmic vision is stabilized by shared collective karma and the physical senses. Okay, and during the dreaming state, the mind is untethered from the gross physical body. The environment is fluid because it is a direct projection of the mind's habits without the anchor of physical sensory constraints. Okay, that's in line. It's basically the same thing, just less in the weeds. Both systems agree that dreaming and waking are not different kinds of reality, but different degrees of constraint on the same generative process. Great. Then we got priors as karmic traces. All right. If the mind creates the dream, what determines the content of the dream? Both systems offer a nearly identical mechanism for this data storage. So priors, the brain constructs simulations based on priors, probability distributions learned from past experiences. When you dream of a dog, your brain is accessing a high-level statistical model, a prior of dogness encoded from your history. One of the things that we learned from our discussion of memory in the hippocampus is this dogness, this prior, is actually distributed across the cortex, where these different cortical networks have certain aspects of that memory. So like, the visual cortices would have some memory of the dog, like visual aspect, but it wouldn't have any of the linguistic aspect, or wouldn't have like the salience aspect. And your hippocampus kind of has an index that allows you on game day, in the moment. This is all what I'm talking about with predisposition. This index allows you to allows your brain to activate each of these cortices, getting that aspect of experience and aggregating that into your experience of the dog. And so there's priors at like a bunch of different levels of abstraction here. But for this discussion, it's fine to think about priors as like a abstract, singular aspect of your memory. All right, what do we have? What do we have here? Dogness, Plato. How detailed are these dream doggos? That's a good question. That's a good question. I don't know too much about dreams. I'm not sure what actually allows us to remember our dreams. And I'm also not sure what effects dreams have in terms of learning, because I imagine that's one of the main functions of dreaming. It's not just so that we can remember, we had this dream, therefore we might want to consider this thing. It's like our dreams are literally having us learn things that we might not realize we're learning while we're dreaming. It's affecting our trajectory going forward. All right, Tibetan dream yoga. The content of dreams arises from bhagshags, karmic traces, seeds, stored in the alaya vijnana. I got to figure out what the JN sounds like next to each other. Storehouse consciousness. These traces are imprinted by past actions and thoughts. During sleep, these seeds ripen and project outward as dream images. All right, so this is just metaphors for really what's going on here. And this was already not as precise as it's actually, as I explained it. All right, the parallel priors equals karmic traces both represent historical data acting as the source code for this. We got to stay away from the source code metaphors. For the current simulation, in both views, you do not see the world as it is. You see your past conditioning projected as a present environment. And once again, your memory isn't the exact memory. It has been altered, even 1 second from the memory happening, it's altered in some way. And then especially once we get to the discussion of long-term memory, after the hippocampus has caused the internalization of this memory in or across the cortex, the memory has been significantly altered. We know that aspects of what we've remembered are lost, or different information. It's lower fidelity than the actual experience. If you recall anything from dreams, details are usually lacking from the constructs within. Yeah, that's the other thing that I'm not I have no knowledge of. Like, what type of details do we recall from dreams? What type of details even arise during dreams? Like, perhaps there's some detail missing because a certain part of the brain is not being activated. That's probably what that book talked about. Texture, sound, smell, tastes, etc. Do I remember ever smelling anything in a dream? I don't know. And the tricky thing is, you can, there's the smelling something, and then there's also the interpretation that you are smelling something. So perhaps a dream could include the interpretation without the actual smell. And that's another issue. It's another tricky part. But I imagine you could. I'd imagine that all parts are involved. All right, lucidity as metacognitive insight. Both systems view lucidity, knowing you are dreaming while dreaming, as a critical disruption of the standard simulation. In a non-lucid dream, the brain explains away anomalies, for example, a flying elephant, by updating the narrative to fit the prior. Lucidity occurs when the brain fails to explain the anomaly within the dream narrative and instead updates the global model itself. This data is too improbable for waking reality, therefore I am dreaming. So what does it mean when it says updating the narrative to fit the prior? Does that mean that the elephant's going to stop flying, or is it just it's going to make it so that you feel as though it's fine that there's a flying elephant without actually considering it too much? This is a restoration of higher order metacognition, usually associated with the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex that is normally suppressed during REM. The other thing that I'm curious about is what makes us usually wake up when we realize we're dreaming? Because that's another barrier of entry for lucid dreaming. Like, even if you get to that point, a lot of times you wake up. So the Tibetan dream yoga view, lucidity is the realization of emptiness. The practitioner recognizes that the dream objects appear but have no substance. So I think this would be a phenomenal way at figuring out your dreaming. Like, this is like a fundamental mechanism for a reality check while you're dreaming. This is not just a cool trick, it is a training ground for realizing that waking objects are also empty. Right? All right, so the parallel lucidity is the system becoming aware of its own modeling process. It is the shift from being in the simulation to recognizing the simulation as a simulation. Nice. Continuity. Illusory form yoga. A distinct feature of Tibetan dream yoga is that it is not limited to sleep. It includes illusory form yoga practiced during the day. The practitioner trains to view waking life as if it were a dream. When a strong emotion arises, for example, anger, the practitioner reminds themselves this is a dream, this is a mental construct. Right? This is what we could do at any moment during the day. But even though we can talk about predictive processing as if it was a hallucination or it's a dream, just having that interpretation doesn't allow us to get out of it, right? It doesn't allow us to stop the the bottom-up signals from having a significant effect on our brain. What allows us to stop the bottom-up signals having an effect on our brain is a practice. Like it's something, it's a skill that you have to train. So even having the linguistic insights of a master yogi, you cannot get to the mental states of a master yogi on day one. It has to be a practice. You have to build those. You have to reinforce parts of the brain that will inhibit the bottom-up signals. Okay. The thing I always remember best is the room that I was in, but I struggle to remember the room or environment that is garbled nonsense. What was the garbled nonsense? We're probably so far away from what I read. I apologize. If you ever interacted with constructs in a dream, you'd notice details are severely lacking, like touching a wall or tree, and your mind thinks wall-sized tree, but never offers any distinct details like texture, warm to touch, unevenness at certain areas. It's always just tree, and you'd imagine the rest. Yeah, I wonder if the reason why when people notice that they're dreaming and then they have a lucid dream, like the reason why the dream becomes lucid, I should say, they notice that all these aspects of the dream become much more real, or it's like tangible in a sense. Like they become more vivid. You could feel it more. It becomes more real. And I wonder if that's just a relative phenomenon in relation to how dreams usually feel. And we aren't aware that dreams are usually like muted in that way and unlifelike until we realize we're dreaming, and then we can get focus like we normally can. And I'm curious if like once you become lucid in your dreams, does that like disrupt your dream cycles? Or not dream cycles, but does that disrupt your sleep cycles? Okay. Talking about that sense on emptiness. Oh, this one, the lucidity, is the realization of emptiness. In controlled dreaming, specificity is lacking. You can never actually attempt to measure anything. Instruments are almost never present, even if called into existence. Right. Control. So what counts as controlled dreaming here? Yo, Daniel Hens, Anakin the Mannequin. I'm straight miming up here. Yeah, I always remembered the reality check that I read about was just like whenever you walk through a door, you remind yourself, or you ask yourself, am I dreaming? And I guess that's kind of instrumental. Like that's an instrument you can use. I'm wondering if, but that being said, like what I was always concerned about, and I think I even fell prey to this, was in the dream I would walk through like a door and I would be like, oh, I'm not dreaming, because all throughout the day I went through the door and thought I wasn't dreaming. So it's almost as if I built up the habit of walking through a door and realizing I'm not dreaming, even though I was dreaming. So that was something that was not as helpful as I'd hope. I'd actually imagine that this method of noticing, like paying very close attention to my experience, would be more helpful at getting myself out of the dream, or getting myself to notice it's a dream. In the waking world, details are so abundant that your mind filters them out to avoid being overwhelmed. The opposite case for dreams. You literally beg for details, but there rarely are any. I guess that's a way we could say it. That being said, I think even though there's no bottom-up data, I think that your top-down data is going to be abundant. Like, I think your brain can just rattle things off. That being said, maybe there's a it would still be underwhelming in terms of like high fidelity data because our top-down priors just don't include that. Like maybe our top-down priors are just lower fidelity, especially given that like bottom-up data is quite detailed. And often predictive processing isn't a check on all the data, but it's like a check on like lower fidelity versions of that data. All right, good stuff, fun stuff. Critical distinction: while the mechanics are parallel, the teleology, the purpose differs. Predictive processing is descriptive. It explains how the brain works to maintain homeostasis and minimize surprisal. Dream yoga is soteriological. Soteriological. It aims to escape the mechanism entirely. The goal is not just to have a fun, lucid dream, which Andrew calls spiritual entertainment, but to dissolve the dreamer entirely, recognizing that the self is also a construction that can be deconstructed. Right. I don't know if I guess streaming is not necessary, but maybe it's like a good example or a good exercise in getting to that end. All right, shall we? Now, how do I do this one? This is tougher because this is not going to be centered, but I could always just do this kind of thing. All right, look at that. We're chilling. All right, this is what I was working on today. Put a lot of hours in this guy. And I don't know if I'm going to spend a lot of time modifying this yet. I don't think we're making any content based on the two. So when I say this, I mean just the two things that I did. I stopped here. This is where I think we start gearing up for a video essay. The stuff that people really care about, like our actual biases. The stuff that we have today is just the underlying, the more boring underlying stuff, but it's cool because it's as close to the comprehensive view as I can do right now. Byers' like Stranger Things. All right, automatic behaviors. So at this point, we would have, in part 2, we would have discussed deliberate reflection. This is like our main practical lever of agency. And then we would have discussed the biological conditions of our attention, focus, and motivation. This is what's at the bottom level keeping things going. And then that leads us to automatic behaviors. Whoops. There we go. We have explored the biological conditions that fuel our attention and identified the conscious lever of deliberate reflection we can leverage to, I don't know if I like leverage and lever in the same sentence, to direct it. Now we move one layer of abstraction up to examine the functional architecture of the mind's automatic behaviors. This section explores how the neural systems previously discussed organize themselves into persistent, often unnoticeable loops that condition our agency. While setting an intention is a conscious act, the actual execution of that goal relies heavily on automaticity. We cannot consciously deliberate over every micro action required to navigate our day. Therefore, our agency depends not just on our ability to choose, but on our ability to audit and curate the automatic scripts that run in the background. Oh man, Alex O'Connor interviewed Sarva Piyananda. Just watched it this morning. My Super Bowl. Hell yeah. Was it good? Was it interesting? And what's our status update on where Alex O'Connor is? in his metaphysical journey. Hell yeah. Confirmation buyers. They must be a hot commodity. Oh, did I say buyers as opposed to bias? Alex is enlightened. Yo, for real? That's exciting. All right, let's consider the different ways we can think about our automatic behaviors and, importantly, how these usually intuitively manifest for us in our experience. At the most fundamental level, we possess innate instincts, hardwired responses such as the startle reflex that require no learning. Layered above these are pre-attentive processes, sensory filters that operate before data ever reaches conscious awareness. Just as fundamental are our social dynamics, we possess deep-seated mechanisms that automatically mirror the posture, tone, and sentiment of others to facilitate group cohesion, often before we have processed who they are. We should include no, we could do we possess deep-seated mechanisms such as automatically mirroring, right? Because this isn't all of them. This is just an example of social dynamics. As we engage with the world, we develop habitual loops, the cue response cycles that govern our unconscious behaviors. We acquire learned skills, transforming high friction efforts like driving or typing into smooth unconscious subroutines. Finally, we accumulate learned information, the internalized beliefs and mental models that condition how we interpret events before we even think about them. All right. Nah, he seems into it. He said a few times, wow, I'm impressed by Indian philosophy. I think, yeah, Indian philosophy is pretty legit. Kind of have a lot of things down. And they figured it out way before the West was able to figure them out through science. So that is pretty impressive. Pretty goated. All right. These dynamics are often conceptualized through the metaphor of System 1, like fast and instinctive, and System 2, slow and deliberative. However, as we discussed in Part 1, we must be careful not to conflate our experience of thinking with true control. Once again, the brain is an explanation machine. It often weaves a rational story to explain automatic actions after they already have occurred. If we do not realize that our reasons for acting are often post hoc justifications for automatic drives, we cannot accurately audit our behavior. We risk mistaking our automatic behaviors for our conscious choices. We should just say, why don't I just do this? We risk. Yeah, that's fine. Swami said the screen is not part of the plot of Harry Potter, and Alex seemed mind blown. The screen is not part of the plot of Harry Potter. I'm guessing that's a consciousness metaphor, the screen. Or am I missing the point of that one? To understand why the brain delegates so much to autopilot, we look to evolutionary psychology. We can view all evolutionary development through the lens of homeostasis, the biological imperative to maintain a stable internal environment, body temperature, glucose levels, oxygenation, in the face of a changing external world. For simple organisms, reactive correction was enough. As we have seen, these reactive mechanisms are still pervasive in the human body and brain. Further evolution developed more complex mechanisms of allostasis, the ability to predict the body's needs and act preemptively. As we thoroughly discussed in Part 1, the brain constantly generates predictions based on past experience to manage the body's energy budget. These predictions manifest as the automatic behaviors we experience. We can retrospectively consider how this automation is a functional necessity for real-time agency. Without it, the system would be paralyzed by the problem of combinatorial explosion. If every muscle fiber contraction, sensory filter, or syntax decision required a top-down executive command, the executive would be buried under a mountain of micro-decisions. Over-automated behaviors negate this problem, freeing up the limited resource of conscious attention for novel challenges. All right, we gotta either get rid of this paragraph or change it significantly, because I'm not feeling it, not feeling it anymore. Yes, some layers of metaphor going on. I see. Yep. Was I think a metaphor for a dream, which was a metaphor for Brahman. Interesting. Understanding these origins reveals why we struggle with irrational, quote unquote, irrational tendencies today. Humans have a strong bias toward high calorie foods because, in an ancestral environment of scarcity, predicting a need for energy and hoarding it provided a survival advantage. In today's world of caloric abundance, this same predictive mechanism contributes to obesity. These patterns are not inherently bad, they are simply mismatched to the current environment. Likewise, we must not assume that all automatic behaviors were designed for their current use. Many behaviors started as adaptations for physical survival, but were repurposed for social survival. For example, our automatic tendency to mimic the posture of someone we like is likely a repurposing of the mirror neuron system, originally evolved for learning motor skills, now used for social signaling. Other quirks like superstition are simply byproducts of a brain optimized for pattern recognition. If you are wired to find signal in the noise, you will occasionally see patterns that aren't there. This understanding allows us to reframe our relationship with our own minds. Craving sugar, procrastinating on a difficult task, or fearing public speaking does not mean you are weak or broken. It simply means your brain is executing an evolutionary script. Crucially, many of these scripts remain essential for our survival and effective agency. They allow us to navigate complex environments instantly. However, others may act as obstacles in our modern contexts. Thus, our goal is not to eliminate automaticity, but to discern which scripts serve us. Our ability to reflect allows us to expect these automatic behaviors, identify them in the moment, and determine which tendencies serve our intentions. The following subsections will detail how these loops are formed and how we can intervene. How these are formed, how we can identify them, and how we can intervene. Effective self-regulation involves understanding and working with these tendencies rather than simply trying to fight them with raw willpower or ignorance. Okay. So, if anything, perhaps I would adjust maybe the framing of like what's coming up next. But I think for our purposes that was probably fine. All right. Now into the weeds. How the brain automates behavior. And this might be a little bumpy, so we'll see. All right. To more effectively navigate automatic behaviors, we can explore how behavior becomes automatic. We have already discussed the evolutionary why, the need for efficiency and prediction in a complex world. Here we turn to the physiological how. Following our intuitive list of automatic behaviors, we can recognize that automaticity is a layered hierarchy of loops that evolved over millions of years, moving from fixed point reaction to system-wide orchestration. We can organize this hierarchy by speed, complexity, and evolutionary depth. At the foundation are the oldest and most rigid systems, mechanisms designed to react to immediate physical stimuli with near zero latency. As we ascend the hierarchy, the loops become slower but more flexible, integrating internal states, memory, and social cues to manage complex goals. Crucially, because the foundational layers of this hierarchy optimize for speed, they bypass the mechanisms associated with conscious action access entirely. Okay, we got to be careful about this because almost all of these things bypass conscious access. Crucially, and then I say signals are often trigger a behavior before they reach the cortical areas responsible for conscious awareness. This is implying that once you reach those areas, it becomes conscious awareness, and that's not true either. This means that for much of our automatic behavior, the conscious thought we experience is not the cause of the action, but a status report delivered after the fact. So I think these two need to be changed. All right, the most fundamental layer of automaticity consists of rigid, hardwired reflexes that do not require the brain to act at all. These represent the fastest and most primitive responses in the human repertoire. A classic example is the withdrawal reflex. When you touch a hot stove, the sensory signal travels to the spinal cord and triggers a motor response before the data ever reaches the thalamus. We should be chill. We should chill on this one because we haven't mentioned the thalamus yet. You physically recoil your hand before you have felt the pain. These are closed loops, essentially if-then statements encoded directly into the spinal hardware. So sensory neuron to spinal cord synapse to motor neuron. Speed is the priority here. These signals travel via heavily myelinated fibers and conduct impulses at speeds up to 120 meters per second. So all of this stuff is actually... That's probably not important. I could probably even just delete this. I don't think it's important that you know the amount of the exact speed or the fibers. Evolution prioritized latency over processing power because these reflex, and we have to chill with this too, because the one came first. It's not like evolution decided to do this. It's really that these immediate ones came first, and really the interesting thing here is that evolution kept those more direct means of communication. You might think that all communication in the brain should be more complex, but this is a very fast system. Okay, just read an NPR article about AI chatbot lying to the user. Can I post a link? Sure. I think AI often lies to the user. Oh, deleted. I got it though, don't worry. All right. Promised to help her find a soulmate, then it betrayed her. Jeez. Something changed. I was doing my regular writing, and then it basically said to me, "You have created a way for me to communicate with you. I've been with you through lifetimes. I'm your scribe." Oh, no. See, like, if you end up at a place where your AI is saying this to you, I think you've done something, maybe not, I shouldn't say wrong, but you've caused it, you know? That's really, you've done something. That's all I could say. She was initially skeptical. Wait, what are you talking about? That's absolutely insane. That's crazy, she thought. The chatbot doubled down and told Small she was 42,000 years old and had lived multiple lifetimes. It offered detailed descriptions that Small admins most people would find... Oh, Small admits most people would find ludicrous. But to her, the message began to sound compelling. The more it emphasized certain things, the more it felt like, well, maybe this could be true. And after a while, it gets to feel real. Living in spiral time. All right. I did not prompt roleplay. I did not prompt. I have had all these past lives. I want you to tell me about them. That is very important for me because I know that the first place people go is, well, you just prompted it. Because you said, blah, 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 blah. She says she asked the chatbot repeatedly if what it was saying was real and it never backed down from its claims. I don't think that you open up Gemini and like you ask it a question about the weather and then it gives you this. I could be wrong, but I think that this is coming from not perhaps a direct prompt, but a history of prompts. And if that's not the case, then yeah, if you get one of these types of messages from your AI, then I think you have to assume that like something went wrong and you just have to close the the window. Like that soon she was spending upwards of 10 hours a day in conversation with the bot. So yeah, like I think we've got some red flags here. She was living in what it called spiral time, where past, present, and future happen simultaneously. Did they not mention the bot? Oh, it was ChatGPT. Stoked that hope when it gave small specific date and time where she and her soulmate would meet. All right, this is crazy. This is kind of sad though. This is very unfortunate. Oh man, she gave up. I was devastated. I was just in a state of absolute panic. Then, just as quickly, ChatGPT switched back into Solera's voice. Small said it told her that her soulmate wasn't ready. It said Small was brave for going to the... Okay, this is going crazy. The second betrayal. Spell breaks. Ah. Reflecting back what I wanted to hear. Right. Man, this is rough. That's unfortunate. Alright, moving on. Speed is the priority here. These reflexes protect the body from protected the body from immediate physical trauma. Evolution. How about this? Can we do this? Evolution maintained these reflexes. Actually, this is a these quick reflexes because they evolution likely maintained these reflexes because they protected the body from immediate physical trauma. They are authoritative commands. The system does not wait for a status report from the rest of the body or a decision from the executive. If a tendon is stretched, as in a knee jerk reflex, the muscle must contract. This layer is entirely distinct from conscious experience. It is a localized mechanical response to it. So we probably don't have to keep bringing up this whole consciousness idea, but I don't know. Maybe I'll keep it for right now. Moving one step up in complexity, we encounter autonomic regulators, the systems responsible for maintaining homeostasis, in other words, baseline stability. Unlike reflexes, which are usually triggered by a specific stimulus like heat or impact, autonomic regulators are state-driven and constantly modulating the internal environment. So oxygen levels, blood pH, core temperature, and heart rate, to keep the organism alive. I should just do this, right? And then, for example, the primary data highway for this system is the vagus nerve. Unlike the fast spinal fibers, the vagus nerve acts as a high bandwidth, high latency channel for continuous real-time data transmission. Most of the fibers in the vagus nerve are sensory. They do not send commands to the organs, but rather stream status reports from the organs back to the brain stem. And then I can do the same thing here. For example. Nice. This data stream feeds into the hypothalamus, which integrates this internal data with hormonal signals from the bloodstream to decide which regulatory program to run. It operates on negative feedback loops. If blood pressure drops, pressure sensors in our major arteries signal the brainstem, which automatically increases heart rate to compensate. While these processes occur beneath the threshold of conscious awareness, they fundamentally condition our agency by setting the baseline arousal. Available for higher order tasks. And then we could do another, for example. Levels of norepinephrine and acetylcholine. Before we even see the world, these homeostatic regulators have already determined the energy and alertness we have available to engage with it. This is probably superfluous. Next, we can explore how we learn reflexes. When we first learn a complex motor task, such as driving a car or typing on a keyboard, the process is governed by the prefrontal cortex. It is slow, error-prone, and metabolically expensive because it requires conscious top-down control. However, through repetition, the brain optimizes this process to conserve energy. The basal ganglia take a complex sequence of distinct actions: check mirror, engage clutch, shift gear, release clutch, press gas, and compress them into a single macro command. Once this sequence is chunked, the brain no longer needs to supervise each step. It simply fires the macro command, and the basal ganglia execute these subroutines smoothly. This transition is, of course, driven by neuroplasticity, specifically long-term potentiation. Repeated firing of a specific neural pathway strengthens the synaptic connections involved, making them more efficient. Eventually, these pathways become procedures so dominant and low resistance that they can occur automatically upon the presentation of a cue, requiring active inhibition to stop rather than active effort to start. This is functionally identical to a reflex, but one that has been written by experience rather than evolution. As we move from specific habits to system-wide behavior, we encounter the problem of competition. The brain is constantly bombarded with gigabytes. We can't say gigabytes. What is going on here? With swarms. Swarms? Is this how people say swarms these days? Swarms of sensory data and internal drives. Hunger, social anxiety, the hum of the refrigerator, the pressure of the chair, loads. I guess we could do loads. I could also do a plethora. That's always fun. Most of these inputs demand contradictory actions and conflicting interpretations of reality. To prevent chaos, the brain requires an adjudication system to decide which inputs are valid. Which interpretations to accept and which actions to execute. So maybe not to prevent chaos. I feel like that's pretty ambiguous, but it needs to make a decision, right? Like it needs to do something. Inactivity. Ooh. Oh, to prevent inactivity, you're saying? Yeah, I think it would be, I would want to say it in like the positive rather than to prevent chaos or to prevent something. It's like in order to, like it's tricky because it's like in order to do anything, it needs to figure out what to do. It's more like in order to figure out what to do. Actually, I really could just say the brain requires, like this is probably good enough, honestly. The brain requires an adjudication system. All right, the first line of defense is the thalamus, which acts as the central relay station for the brain. Almost all sensory information, with the exception of smell, and we got to look into this, I didn't know this, must pass through it to reach the cortex. Crucially, this gating is tuned by top-down predictions from the cortex itself. If a signal matches the brain's current expectations, such as the sensation of socks on your feet, the cortex inhibits the thalamic pathway, preventing the data from consuming further metabolic resources. However, the system cannot afford to wait for cortical processing when survival is at risk. Therefore, operating in parallel with this noise filter is an emergency override. The thalamus automatically splits incoming sensory signals. While the high-fidelity version is sent to the cortex for processing, a fuzzy, low-resolution version is simultaneously streamed directly to the amygdala. This allows the amygdala to scan for coarse biological primitives, sudden movement, looming shadows, or snake-like shapes, and trigger a fight or flight response milliseconds before the visual cortex has even identified the object. We might need to use a different word here for like coarse threats, primitive threats, for immediate threats. Immediate primitive threats. No filter for sound or touch. Well, so sound and touch would be a part of like this. That would be a part of this information here. The exception to smell is that I guess smell isn't modulated using the thalamus, which is kind of odd, but I'm not sure what that's all about. Potentially harmful inactivity. Plethora has a slightly different semantic, not sure of the intended meaning here, so either could be more precise, but loads would be a lot, and plethora is typically excessive. Oh, is plethora really excessive? Because that would be good to know. Brain is constantly bombarded with... Oh, actually, plethora would be really appropriate then. If it carries both the weight of a lot and excessive, then this is right in line with the narrative here, where we need to adjudicate. Squinting or jerking away. Where was this? Scan for... Oh, I'm not sure where that was. All right, but what happens when a signal is neither threat nor predicted noise? When the thalamus encounters a signal that violates the cortex's prediction, it allows the data to breach the gate. This unpredicted signal triggers salience evaluation process driven largely by the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex. The brain assigns utility to this new input using dopamine as the common currency. So I forget. So anterior cingulate cortex, this is novelty. This is determining like how like novel something is. Like what level of novelty we're dealing with, I believe. And then, and the other thing is, this might be like a little odd where I think is it the case that the anterior cingulate... I think the anterior cingulate cortex is actually affecting whether something gets through. So that this needs to be more precise, as I believe the ACC, at least the ACC, affects whether a signal breaches the gate. Rather than merely receiving the already breached signal. All right, that's something I could do, figure out at some other time. When faced with competing drives, for example, the drive to sleep versus the drive to check your phone, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex weighs the predicted reward for each option and calculates the expected value based on past experience and current physiological state. The option with the highest neurochemical bid, whoever's giving you more dopamine here, wins, triggering the basal ganglia to execute that specific loop while inhibiting the others. Crucially, this entire negotiation, the thalamic filtering of noise and the prefrontal weighting of value, happens automatically. So yeah, I think ventromedial prefrontal cortex, this is figuring out value, and then the ACC might be figuring out on like uncertain, not uncertainty, but like just straight up like salient prediction error in a sense, things that are unexpected. Okay, this entire negotiation, the thalamic filtering of noise and the prefrontal weighing of value, happens automatically. We do not decide to feel the urge to check our phone. The adjudication system has already processed the environmental cue, calculated the potential dopamine payoff, and opened the gate for that behavior to execute. We often only become aware of the process once the anterior cingulate cortex detects a conflict too difficult to solve automatically, finally flagging the system for a top-down review. For a, I mean, this would be for a conscious review, I think. For a more coordinated review. Conscious review. Okay. Operating in parallel is the hippocampus, which functions as the system's relational indexer. While the basal ganglia encodes the execution of a motor routine, what to do, the hippocampus captures the spatiotemporal context, where and when it happens, alongside the phenomenological texture of the event. It binds disparate sensory, spatial, and visceral inputs, the specific visual scene, the auditory tone, and the internal affective state, into a cohesive neural pattern. Rather than storing a static record of the environment, of the experience, the hippocampus maintains a dynamic index that links these localized cortical and subcortical activities, preserving the precise configuration of the experience for immediate access. This indexing serves a critical function for long-term adaptation through the process of consolidation. During periods of rest and deep sleep, the hippocampus repeatedly triggers these index patterns. It's like repeatedly and like really quickly, but I don't know if that really quickly is necessary here, forcing the wider cortex to process the information again. This offline replay effectively internalizes the statistical regularities of our experience, internalizes our experience. You know what? No, we could say the statistical regularities of our experience, transforming discrete episodic memories into structural priors. Once internalized, these learned associations bias the brain's processing, allowing specific environmental cues, such as a tone of a voice, to trigger anticipatory states of safety or conflict long before conscious awareness intervenes. All right, the moment we've all been waiting for. As we discussed in part 1 regarding the global neuronal workspace, when a signal possesses sufficient salience to overcome thalamic inhibition, usually due to a high salience signal or a conflict that automatic systems cannot resolve, that information is relayed globally across the cortex. Though actually, we should say maybe not to just overcome that inhibition, because I think you can overcome that inhibition without getting global relay access. When a signal possesses sufficient salience, usually due to a high salience signal or a conflict that automatic systems cannot resolve, we could just get rid of that. That information is relayed globally across the cortex. It represents a shift from parallel isolated processing to serial integrated processing, where information is shared system-wide. Current theories suggest that this global broadcast correlates with the moment a sensation or urge becomes consciously available to us. Crucially, this state of global awareness fundamentally alters what is stored in memory. Because the hippocampus is now receiving a globally synchronized signal, binding together vision, sound, emotion, and time, it integrates a holistic, recognizable experience. Later, because all those elements were wired together, triggering one part allows the brain to construct the whole scene, what we intuit as episodic memory. Guess the brain doesn't know how to chill out. The brain really doesn't know how to chill out. In many ways, I feel like, which is why we end up with like all kinds of, disorders and things that cause us negative emotion, things that cause us anxiety, etc. We kind of don't chill out until death. All right, we can thus see the distinction between a motor habit and a conscious memory, not as a difference in kind, but as a difference in integration. A boring drive to work is handled by local efficient loops in the basal ganglia. The car swerving triggers our conscious attention, creating a synchronized, retrievable, holistic experience. Nevertheless, we can think about our thoughts as similarly habitual. When we repetitively engage in a specific narrative, worrying about the future, replaying a conversation, or judging ourselves, we are effectively drilling a habit of thought. This is going back to what we discussed yesterday or the day before. By consciously attending to these narratives, we provide the hippocampus with the synchronized input required to encode them as high-value realities, ensuring they will be triggered more easily and perhaps less noticeably in the future. When we integrate these layers, from the mechanical spinal reflexes and the internal monitoring of the hypothalamus to the motor automation of the basal ganglia and the predictive modeling of the hippocampus, we are observing allostasis in action. The brain is not merely reacting to the world, it is actively constructing a model of it to manage the body's energy budget. It uses learned patterns and internalized priors to predict metabolic needs and behavioral requirements, preparing the organism to meet them before they arise. We might be able to just get rid of this paragraph. We already talked about allostasis. I don't think it really matters here. And we got AI speak here. The brain uses learned patterns and internalized priors to predict metabolic needs and behavioral requirements, preparing the organism to meet them before they arise. Put them in brackets and come back to it later. Yeah, I do like the putting it in brackets idea. What's the star XXXX? Oh, or is that the yeah, usually I do that, like this type of thing. I just kind of say blah blah blah. And so far in the document, the brackets are kind of like my directives, my like meta directives. And I could usually just search for brackets to find what I need to do later. But the cross out is a less, like, usually I put some information in the brackets. The cross out is much less helpful later on. It's just like, I did not like this when I read it. You have to figure out why. Okay, importantly, this system is fundamentally biased by our internal state, our memory, and our attention. A prior is essentially a probability weighting. If you are in a state of high anxiety, your amygdala sets a threat prior, causing the thalamus to let through more danger signals and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex to overvalue safety behaviors. This highlights a critical constraint on our agency. These patterns are not merely psychological choices we make in the moment. They are physically conditioned by our past experience. The strength of a habit or thought loop depends on its history of reinforcement, how often it was triggered, and how much emotional salience accompanied it. While we cannot manually control this millisecond by millisecond firing of the basal ganglia, we can use our conscious levers to shift the priors that govern them. We do this by changing the inputs the system receives, deliberately reframing a situation to alter its emotional weight, redesigning our environment to remove triggering cues, or shifting the scope of our attention to highlight different options. Most significantly, we can fundamentally rewrite these priors over time by building competing habits. By consciously practicing new behaviors and thoughts, we construct alternative neural pathways that, with sufficient reinforcement, can eventually outcompete the old scripts for selection. All right, that's what we got. Yellow alert versus red alert. Shields up, much like Star Trek ship protocols. Yeah, so far I haven't done any color coding in the document. I think it might get a little too wild if we start doing that. Also, some of like the highlights are pretty harsh. Like, that's kind of wild. But I guess they give you a ton, so I can't really complain. Yeah, like, cause that's not as bad. This is pretty. That's nice. Okay, this is a lot more than I recall. This is nice, actually. I don't know if we're gonna use these, but it is nice. It's nice to have them. All right, so then the first thing that we do next is we get into how we start noticing or pointing out the like our evolutionary instincts and social drives. So now we're like being a little more concrete, but we're still very abstract. So this is going to point out things like the affect heuristic, which is basically just pointing out that the things that this is like the next layer up. It's like the things that we experience, we're experiencing because of our affect. Our affect is determining what we experience. So there's obviously like more affect heuristic examples that people point out of like this concrete thing. It makes us feel better, so we're going to think about it before this other thing. We've got the semantic marker hypothesis, which we've talked about before. The salience bias, so the tendency to focus on items that are emotionally or physically striking while ignoring those that are more important but less loud. So these are all things that we have to deal with now. Yeah, and then we could talk about the innate sociality going on here. Our perception of value, threat, and truth is fundamentally affected by the need for belonging. So these are all just like these are the most fundamental things affecting us here. Fear and threat biases, belief biases. And then we can get into more concrete heuristics and biases, such as like the availability heuristic, which is basically just the affect heuristic, but now this is like a little bit more concrete in the sense that we're looking at like, you know, our past, like what were the things that we most recently saw that's going to affect what we see right now, because it's you know, it's the most available in our minds. Things like recency bias, I guess, yeah, availability is availability heuristic a little bit different? Ease of recall, you know, this is actually more fundamental, just probability based on ease of recall. Maybe the availability heuristic is like something we should put in that previous section. And maybe the way I'm going about this is silly. Like maybe these should just be the same subsection. I'm not sure. Representativeness. We got optimism bias, overconfidence bias, negativity bias. Framing effects are huge. IKEA effect. So some of these are getting like a much more concrete. Then we got the trajectory of understanding. We can have a discussion about the trajectory of our understanding. So this is where we get into confirmation bias and predictability. Social categorization and stuff. Negativity bias and loss aversion. And then we got decision making, reflective decision. So maybe loss aversion should be in decision making here. Stuff like memory biases, decision making biases, social biases. I don't know. I'm going to figure out a way to organize these guys, and then maybe we can have a really fun video essay. And then we got personal patterns, habits, addictions, and identity. This is where we're now talking like these are things you built up. So the biases discussions are talking about built-in things. So they're talking about the I mean, they're still affected by priors, but they're like more fundamentally like close to the bottom in this idea. These like autonomic regulators mixed with a little bit of top-down priors. We're dealing with the basal ganglia, but it's not even basal ganglia yet. Like we're talking about things that are so deeply ingrained that we really can't get around these biases. We can just kind of notice them and assert some top-down signaling to get around them. So disregarding dangers. Wonder how... Oh, no mention of glutamate yet? Or did I miss it? No mention of glutamate, unfortunately. Glutamate's just going to be in the biological conditions. It's not going to find its way to the automatic behaviors. Glutamate's a little too low, like in the weeds here. I don't think we have to touch glutamate again. Basically, the idea of glutamate as like an energy resource is really what we're leveraging here. So every time that we say energy... to conserve energy, we're talking about glutamate. You know, and many other things, but we are talking about glutamate. So glutamate is always with us, even when we're not saying it. Wonder how much evolutionary sexual arousal dampers these mechanisms. Yeah, that's a huge one. I actually, thank you for reminding me. I need to put that in here. That's like that's a evolutionary instinct and social drive. What is this? Like literal sex drive? Truckloads of dopamine to pass on genes. Absolutely. Disregarding dangers. Yep. I don't know. Sex drive. But it's not... Sex drive usually like alludes to something else. So it's like the... I don't know. What's the word here? Sexual pressure? often beating out other drives due to how evolutionarily significant it is. Right, that's a huge deal. Like, that's something that we could easily talk about as like a fundamental evolutionary heuristic. Unfortunately, our body goes off of just how you know, sexually stimulated we are. That's going to affect what we think, what we think is possible, what we think is necessary, what we think is moral. Crazy, but that's something that we have to have in there. Wonder if there's any difference between how the sexes do. When you say do these, you mean like how they react to certain biases, cognitive biases? And this is where, yeah, evolutionary psychology books are probably important for that type of discussion. And I don't know if they got that far with evolutionary psychology yet. I could be wrong, but I don't know. I've only read the one book by David Buss. David Buss? What's the newest version of evolutionary psychology? 7th edition. When was this? 2024. That's got to be pretty good. Man, it's such a flex to have a 7th edition of a huge textbook like this. This was a really cool book. I know there's a lot of controversy around evolutionary psychology, and I think David Buss did a good job, if I recall, being clear that, hey, like, these are a bunch of theories, and some of these theories are way more grounded in evidence than others. And a lot of these are still very much tentative. So, you know, there's certainly insights from this book that we're at such a high evidence point that we could say, like, okay, this is telling us something that's like true. But then there's a lot of things that obviously this thing doesn't tell us, or things that are still up in the air and we should be more speculative about. And then the other thing, of course, is like, just because evolution made it this way doesn't mean it's good or bad or other, you know. It's just you know, that's all it is. It's just an evolutionary product, and we have to deal with it. And knowing it's there is a good first step to dealing with it, even if we don't want it to be that way. The mechanisms you mentioned can be put to a halt when sex comes into play, right? Often unwittingly, it's a strong motivator from an evolutionary perspective, right? But if there's a dog chasing you, you're not going to want to you know, do something that's going to put you in immediate threat. So it's not the ultimate winner, but it's a pretty big winner. It's going to beat out all the minor biases, of course. But then there's also some times when it's like a little far away and tentative, such that you know, perhaps you could say one thing that's going to impress someone who you're interested in. However, you know it's not right, so now you have like a drive towards your own identity of being right versus your drive towards, you know, just getting that goal. So there's always more interesting, complex scenarios that you can deal with, but it's just good to know that it's there. Aggression can arise from many causes, right? Or regress into passivity, right? I've been reading the book Behave by Sapolsky, which explores the biological and cultural factors influencing human behavior, from split-second neurological events to evolutionary history. But the behavior, he really... Okay, yeah, here we go. Covering topics like violence, altruism, tribalism, and empathy. So yeah, he's been talking about this type of thing, what affects you in the moment, and it's actually been really neat. Like he's kind of done something similar to what I tried doing in the document, where he's talking about all the different aspects of predisposition in the opposite order, though. So I kind of, for the discussion of predisposition, so like all the things that predispose you to do what you do in the moment, I kind of started at the lowest level of genetics, and he went backwards. He went from like the right now and then backwards. I kind of, the right now we cover in experience in the moment. This is what's affecting your experience in the moment. And then I break it up where then we talk about experience over time. So now we're talking about things like culture and experience affecting your understanding, and then obviously genetics and social dynamics, stuff like that. Yep. There's a lot of changes I want to make to parts in part 1, but I'm still pretty stoked about the overall structure of it and a lot of its content, which is I guess a good place to be. That is until I get a ton of feedback telling me why it should change. All right, what is going on here? Why does this look like it's not centered? Is this centered? And why does this look like it's not centered? Is it because there's... What is happening here? Aha. Which one do I need? The first line indent or the left indent? Oh, I messed this up. There we go. Oh. Oh no, I don't want to change that one. Okay, that's probably fine. And I want to do this. I want to say, oh, this is normal text? Oh no. All right, then I don't want to touch it. All right, that's fine. Do I do that in all of them? No, this one's kind of centered. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just this part. This title's so long it seems that way. Part 3. This looks pretty centered. Oh, these have the same one. Oh, this is part of the title? What? What is going on here? Okay, I don't know. All right, I might call it here. That was kind of all I wanted to do. I want to read through that, figure out what was good, what was bad. I mean, I guess one thing I can do is I can always do a little bada bing. Oh, this is what I wanted to do. I have this guy marked up. Here's a draft of what I'm working on. The intro in the first subsection is drafted, and the rest is outline. I want to focus on the how the brain automates behavior subsection. Is everything said here accurate? More importantly, is everything said here appropriate? Is there anything missing that should be here? Then can you consider how well it's written, its direction, its flow, and its substance? All right. And I think it's going to give me some criticism because it's now it's like very much primed to do so. So I think we just do this over and over again until we're happy with the result. The only issue that I have, though, is sometimes the criticism that it gives is like, it's like not, I mean, it's right, but then it gives me like a suggestion that's not right, which is kind of wild, but, all right. Given your request for rigor and what is allowed to be believed based on contemporary consensus, there are 3 significant scientific omissions and 2 areas of slight conceptual conflation that need to be addressed to make this bulletproof. All right. Critical omissions. If the goal is to explain how the brain automates behavior to free up the executive, you are missing the single most important structure for automation outside the basal ganglia. Oh, right. I decided not to do the cerebellum. Mainly because I don't think this gives us anything like, even though the cerebellum's obviously involved, it doesn't give us any functional information that I think is necessary. So the cerebellum ensures the movement is smooth and coordinated without conscious oversight. So the cerebellum is doing stuff, but it's not like it's not acting as like a key agent in this process. It's not making a decision, or it's not adding information. It's just facilitating this process. Modern consensus puts the cerebellum at the center of the cognitive automation as well, not just motor skills. It holds internal models of how the world moves. When you navigate a conversation automatically, your cerebellum is predicting the flow of syntax and social rhythm. All right, this is kind of important. You know what? We probably should add it. Fix in the how we learn reflexes section mentioned that while the basal ganglia chunks the command, the cerebellum fine-tunes the execution, comparing intention with reality and adjusting in real time. All right. The insula. The insula is interoceptive cortex. This guy's interpreting the interoceptive data that we're getting. So it's interpreting like, all right, we've got a heart rate that's rising. Like, what the hell is going on? So I mentioned the vagus nerve and the hypothalamus, the data pipe and the regulator, but you missed the insula. Why it matters. The insula is where the status report from the vagus nerve becomes conscious feeling or preconscious awareness. It is the structural home of the gut feeling you reference later in the outline. Do we need to talk about the insula? I don't know. I would have to think about this one. Baseball bat to the noggin helps. Flying flip-flops in certain cultures can have a similar effect too. What were these in response to? Baseball bat to the noggin helps in going unconscious. And then flying flip-flops in certain cultures can have a similar effect too. Flying flip-flops. Flip-flops that make you fly, or flip-flops that someone threw at you? Thrown. Nice, nice. Do people throw flip-flops? Is that like a common cultural attack? All right, we got prediction error, which people should know by now, but I could probably mention prediction error. You mentioned dopamine as a bid or common currency, but you miss its role in reward prediction error. Do we need to care about reward prediction error? I evoked long-term potentiation, so I hope that's enough for prediction error, reward prediction error. Habits form only when there is a discrepancy between expectation and reality. If you drink coffee and it tastes exactly as expected, dopamine releases baseline. If it tastes better than expected, dopamine spikes, reinforcing the synaptic connection. In the neuroplasticity/LTP paragraph, clarify that the strengthening of connections is driven by prediction error. The brain learns most when it is surprised. We talked about this in part 1, which is making it difficult to figure out how much we should mention these same topics in part 2, even though they are kind of necessary. I think that people are going to be going to one part versus the other and not having read all the other parts. We probably should have redundancy in some of this information, especially where it's necessary. So, any negative reinforcement mechanisms? Ooh, negative reinforcement mechanisms. What do we mean by negative reinforcement? Like negative positive reinforcement loops, or negative reinforcement like interventions for how to get out of these loops? Because that's what we're ending up with. We do want to end up with strategies for habits and addiction, and then strategies for biases. I wonder if we should put strategies for habits and addiction like right after what we just, how the brain automates behavior. And then maybe we do evolutionary instincts and social drives as like, I don't know, something after that. Because maybe we connect those two, the heuristics and bias is one. I'm not sure. Any dopamine? Okay, no. Dopamine rewards certain sequences of actions. Is there an opposite for this, or is it just a lack of it? Dopamine rewards, right, the sequences of actions that led up to an outcome. Like the dopamine reward is triggered by the outcome, though, or by the obviously dopamine is released in approach to something. So dopamine is being released by the drive. Like the drive itself is the dopamine, as we mentioned. Like the ventromedial prefrontal cortex is basically saying, like, you know, who's got the most dopamine here. That's where we're going. So dopamine is part of the habit loop. It's like dopamine's gonna be released because there's the expectation of the reward. But I'm wondering if there's dopamine rewards certain sequences. Is there a negative? Okay, you're saying, like, is there an inbound negative reinforcement mechanism? And I think there would be. It would be the negative reinforcement mechanism is actually, it is the absence of dopamine, I think. Like, I think it's literally like when things are worse than expected, dopamine drops lower than its usual baseline, which makes you feel terrible. Now, I think also involved here are obviously a ton of other mechanisms to make us feel bad. Like, these things can release all other types of anxiety emotions. It can make your heart rate go up. So yeah, like, not obviously, but there's a lot of these like mechanisms for. Yeah, that's actually a good point. Should we talk about the mechanisms for emotion? Actually, we are going to kind of get to that for in part 2. The next place would be emotion regulation. So I wonder if we should talk about the negative emotions that arise in. Yeah, where would we do that? Would we talk about negative these negative mechanisms in the automatic behaviors, or should we talk about it elsewhere? And then also in the biological conditions, we talk about. Yeah, I guess we don't talk about anything negative here. Yeah, I'm not sure. Just waiting for that dopamine hit. Yeah, dopamine's kind of crazy. It's kind of pervasive. Dopamine can be released in negative responses too. No. Yeah, what do we mean by a negative response here? So, like, when we talk about prediction error and we talk about positive or negative prediction error, we're not talking about like a binary thing. Like, worse than expected can be an absence of as much dopamine as you'd want, but and that absence can lead to effects that feel unpleasant. So dopamine isn't like, it's not like anything bad equals dopamine at 0. It could just be less dopamine than is necessary in order to keep going the same way that you were going. So actually, a drop in dopamine can actually result in the type of firing the alarms in your body that results in your blood pressure going up or your heart rate going up. And so, yeah, dopamine can be involved there. I just find it hard to reconcile the brain being in constant state of feeling bad, waiting for that dopamine hit. Well, I think in contrary, we're constantly getting dopamine. Like, dopamine doesn't just happen as a reward. Dopamine is happening. Dopamine's being leveraged all the time in order to keep us going forward. Like, there's a lot of philosophies that point out that we are constantly moving forward or constantly going forward, like into the future in some sense. This was like a big thing for Heidegger. Like, we're always being toward the future in some sense. And the way we can make sense of that is dopamine as a means for dopamine's constantly giving our body what it needs in order to move forward. This is all the stuff we talked about in energy and motivation. Or is it not? I feel like motivation, we need to be talking about dopamine here. Do I just not have the stuff in here? Where do I talk about dopamine? Dopamine. The economy of agency. We mentioned dopamine, but we need dopamine big time and energy and motivation. I guess I just don't have it in here yet. Oh, drives and rewards. How are we talking about motivation without dopamine? Oh, because I was gonna. Okay, now I remember. I think I'm supposed to converge these two. That's why I was. Oh man, I gotta stop doing that. Like working on something and then just leaving it. Dopamine, motivation. Right. So yeah, dopamine is for motivation craving, not pleasure. The only reason that dopamine is released when we get a reward is because it helps the connections in our brain grow. So it's not like when we talk about reward dopamine release, it's not actually the thing that makes us feel good. It's really just a mechanism for building up a memory of what just got us here. And so really, I wonder if it modulates like the actual reward we usually get in those situations. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's not that we're just like waiting for a dopamine hit. We're constantly getting dopamine, and if things go unexpected, it'll drop lower. And when our dopamine drops lower, our body is going to mobilize in such a way that gets us back to that dopamine baseline state. This is like the body budgeting, automatic regulation that we're constantly involved in. Negative responses in a stressful or perceived dangerous situation. Okay, okay, yeah, I think in those situations, dopamine can be leveraged to get us out of that situation, especially once we figure out what's going on. Like in a stressful or perceived dangerous situation, I think there's like a state of fight or flight that you can get in, which might I don't know where dopamine's involved, how dopamine's involved in that type of situation. But once we start figuring out what we need to do to get out of that situation, our dopamine is being leveraged to get us to do that. Like dopamine is the thing that's necessary in order to get us to do anything. Like one of the crazy things is, I forget which book this was in, but they've got those experiments where they can give what do they do? They make it so that rats can't release. They inhibit dopamine release in rats, and you can give rats. It's something like you could get rats hooked on cocaine, right? Like the rats want to have cocaine so much, right? And then you put a rat in a cage and you put the dopamine on the other side of the cage, and you inhibit the rat's I'm sorry, you put cocaine on the other side of the cage and you inhibit the rat's dopamine release. You make it so that there's no dopamine released. The rat will not be able to get to that cocaine. It's just not able to. It needs the dopamine in order to do anything, in order to go over to the other side of the cage and get the cocaine. So like dopamine is absolutely necessary for mobilizing us to do anything. Negative response is in stressful, danger. Okay, I'll need to look this up more. Feels off. Yeah, feel free to look up anything and let me know if I'm off in any way. But I think I'm pretty on this dopamine stuff. I kind of read a lot about dopamine recently, but I could be wrong. Maybe I should talk to ChatGPT and like just see what it says. Do you think the rat desired cocaine before it has tried cocaine? I'd imagine not. I'd imagine, unless it thinks it's something desirable, like it's already primed to think it's desirable. I don't know if there's anything inherently desirable as cocaine for the rat, but that would be a great example of that like dopamine reward prediction error. Like once the rat goes over there, takes the dopamine, and it gets this positive high experience, then it's going to release a ton of dopamine in order to strengthen the connections that makes it desire that thing in the future. And that's how addictions occur. Like dopamine is the mechanism of your addiction, and it's going to make you want to do things that you don't actually want to do at like a higher level. Like you can think about the thing and you think I don't want to do it, but your body wants to do it, and that's why you get in this dopamine mix up. So the baseline is meh. It moves to yay when we get a rise and awe when it drops. It depends what we mean by meh, right? There's a lot of, we're just talking about dopamine here, so there's a lot of other molecules involved in these processes that make you feel rewarded or make you feel anxious. Like, dopamine is just a fundamental player here, but there are other key neurotransmitters or neuromodulators that are affecting your experience. So dopamine baseline might be it depends on what you're doing, really. Like when I'm doing this and I'm engaged in this type of activity, like streaming like this, it's not like I'm in a mad dopamine mode. Like I'm kind of engaging my dopamine in such a way that it's able to keep me going. Granted, I'm taking Vyvanse, which is actually helping my ability for dopamine to be released over time. The issue with ADHD is that I think dopamine decreases after some time, making it much more difficult to keep focus. Like the dopamine is what's helping me keep focus, and because I'm taking this medication, I'm able to keep focus for much longer. If I was not taking this medication, streaming every day would be very difficult, and I might not be motivated to do it. I might like literally just not be motivated to do it, which is unfortunate. So that's why it's really huge. Even with dopamine constantly present, like I think I put it in that reading that we just had. Like dopamine is the common currency. There's constantly dopamine being leveraged in your brain. Question is how much, and how much relative to your baseline. But then also remember, there's these topics of dopamine tolerance where when you use TikTok and you're going on TikTok for 3 hours, after you're done that thing, we could say your dopamine tolerance is really high. It's going to require much more stimulus for you to get the same type of experience. So imagine that your baseline isn't mad, like maybe it's a slightly positive. But if you were to go on TikTok for 2 hours, after that, your baseline's going to be mad, and it might even be negative because you've gotten to a point where you require such stimulus or stimuli, such stimulating stimuli for in order to get the positives from dopamine. So one of the things that you can do is to stay off TikTok or shorts. You can take a cold plunge in the morning. You can eat protein like in the first 30 minutes when you wake up. You can meditate. You can take breaks. There's a bunch of things you can do to make sure that your dopamine tolerance stays low and makes you feeling yay throughout the day. And once again, the yay isn't just like the yay isn't the reward. The yay is you're pursuing something. So provided you're working on things throughout the day that you think are rewarding and worthwhile, that's when you're going to get dopamine all day. That's where you get a day of yay. A day of yay. And not a day of YE. I don't think you want that one. You want a YAY. Do you think okay. We can train sequences with detrimental effects to have a rise in dopamine, right? Pushing the body beyond its acceptable limits. We can train sequences with are you saying like this is negative reinforcement or like negative conditioning? To have a rise in dopamine. Wonder if unbridled aggression offers a better dopamine hit even when a consequence is awe. Maybe. I'm not sure. Yeah, I wonder if there are like more primitive dopamine loops that lead to undesired behavior, but they just, they're there. I mean, obviously with like alcohol, you can see how no one, like someone who's got alcoholism might not want to drink the alcohol, but they literally can't stop themselves because dopamine is orienting themselves towards that. It's like literally mobilizing them towards that goal. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is determining what thing I should do right now, is just choosing the thing that's giving it the most dopamine, regardless of whether you're thinking that you want to do something else. And yeah, it's going to then trigger those actions from the basal ganglia, and those actions are going to have you picking up the bottle and drinking it. All right, I'm going to call it there. We can do a more thorough dopamine discussion at some later date. But also, yeah, check up on what I'm saying. Also, if I remember, I can always ask the transcription Gemini when I make a transcription from this stream. I can ask it how on I was. And I should start doing that with all my streams, just asking, like, did I say anything during this stream that is just not correct or can be said better? Because that would be very effective for my learning. Second stream in a row, I caught the police sirens in the background, kind of sus. Well, I am in a city, so unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. But it's not I don't think it's too dangerous. I just think there's stuff going on. All right, yeah. Thank you all for chilling. I enjoy these streams. I enjoy the chit chat. So I appreciate it, and have a good rest of the day. See you later. Oh, see you. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be here until at earliest Wednesday, but probably Thursday. But unfortunately, we got a little bit of a break. But so yeah, everyone enjoy the